All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar on Supercharge your board for fundraising. My name is Rachel Escobedo. I am the online ambassador for Sanford Programs, and I will be your moderator today. So this is just our mission statement from Sanford Institute of Philanthropy. We help nonprofits significantly increase their fundraising capabilities and impact that they have in their communities and society through proven contemporary curriculum presented by world-class nonprofit leaders, or best-in-class faculty, and renowned philanthropists. Quick shout out to our affiliate partners from Maricopa in Arizona, to Howard University, JFK University, Augustana, and of course, City University of Seattle. If you are on social media today, go ahead and give us a shout out by hashtagging SIP webinar. We would greatly appreciate that. All right, let's jump right in. So our speaker today is Libby Stellas, and I'm going to read you a little bit about Libby's background. So Libby is the director of Sanford Institute of Philanthropy at City University and has been a fundraiser in many organizations for over 25 years. She asked for and received donations for 100 to 500,000 for many different kinds of nonprofits. You will hear real-world experiences and scenarios that you can put concepts into action right away. The format will be conversational with the opportunity for questions and answers. All right, welcome, Libby.
Hi, everybody. I want to just check with Rachel. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Okay, great. Along with my experience, one thing I want to add is that I have also been a donor, a board member, and the president of a board. So I think I have experience to share on both sides of the questions about how to help boards with fundraising. So we're interested in knowing how you are related to your nonprofit today. Are you a board member, a nonprofit professional, a volunteer? And through the chat, you can submit that, and we'll find out. I just want to find out a little bit more about who's online today. And I'll let that go for just a moment.
Thank you, Libby. Okay, we have some responses coming in. Development officer, board member for Greenlight Solutions Foundation, leadership advisor to nonprofits, nonprofit professional, executive director, CEO, executive director, nonprofit CEO, Oh, a number of CEOs on today. Operations director, board member and chair, development director, development manager, and nonprofit. Okay, I'll do a couple more here. Aw, someone left a comment for you, Libby, and she said, and we love Libby. Board member, resource development manager. Thank you so much for your responses, guys. We'll be checking in with you throughout the webinar. And if you do have questions, please feel free to send them into the chat box, but we will hold them and answer them at the end.
Okay, so it looks like just from the responses that most folks are nonprofit professionals in a variety of roles, and the board members that are on, I'm really excited for that. You know, I've been told that you know, the #1 fear in life is the fear of public speaking. And I think the fear of asking for money or being thought that you had to ask for money could follow as a second fear. And I'm hopeful that I can help reduce some of those fears and give you some ways in which you can help your board feel more comfortable about fundraising. So all of the Sanford programs, all of our workshops are based on this, what we call the cause selling cycle. And I want to let you know that if you look at this and you look at phase 1 and phase 2, It isn't until you get around to phase 3 that even the word, the ask, is there. So what's important to remember always is that being able to raise funds is about building strong and genuine relationships with donors through a proven process, of which your board is a big part of that. Board members really can help in that relationship. If you look to this left, you'll see a traditional model of asking, which places emphasis on telling, qualifying, presenting features, and closing. If you look to the right, we're talking about an entirely different model of asking, which is building trust and rapport. 40% of the efforts that we do are in that area. Probing, asking questions, and listening, telling about benefits, and then 10% is making the ask. So as a board member, for me, if I knew that the ask part that I might be involved with is a very tiny part, it might help reduce my anxiety about being a part of fundraising. So I want to recap the 10 kind of essential board responsibilities that exist for all nonprofit boards. And those are, the first one is to determine the mission and purpose. So the board is the one that holds the mission, the why of the organization. The board also selects a chief executive. The board is there to support and evaluate the chief executive, to ensure effective planning, to monitor and strengthen programs and services, to ensure legal and ethical integrity, enhance the organization's public standing, build a competent board. And then the last two that I left to the last is the meat of where we are today. Ensure adequate financial resources and protect the assets and provide proper financial oversight. This is where the role of board in fundraising and in all areas of finances for a nonprofit is essential. The board has what's called a fiduciary responsibility, which means they have to act in the best interest of the organization and allow for financial resources that will assist the organization. So if things really went sideways, the board is the one who actually has the legal responsibility for the organization. So ensuring adequate financial resources is essential to a healthy organization. So it's my belief that everyone can be a good fundraiser. And by that, I do not mean that everybody's asking people. I'm not asking anybody to stand on the corner with a checkbox or with cookies or anything like that. But for a board, establishing from the start that fundraising is an expected activity and that you help them understand what that means. So look at your job description that you have for your board members. Does it actually show that, yes, you do have a responsibility to make it clear that the board and everyone is capable of participating in some aspect of the fundraising process? And that needs to be upfront, because we want people who join our boards to be able to sign on with energy and excitement and not have something come up that they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was a part of what I do. So, but in that, it's still not all about asking for money. So we want to take away the mystery of fundraising for boards by breaking it down into clear and simple tasks, communicate how their work fits into a bigger picture, teach them the case, the why of the organization, and manage as fundraising professionals to be their mentor, to help them. Because if you think of yourself, if you were put in a situation and someone just said, well, go do that, but never assisted you in how you're going to do that, you would be fearful and concerned that you didn't want to be a part of that. And that's true for boards as well. And in my experience of being on a board, I had to kind of say, well, wait, what do you mean by this? And your board members will ask that question too. So always and everywhere, everything I've ever done in nonprofit fundraising is about focusing on relationships, not the money. I'll leave you with a little story about, I worked on a capital campaign for a large neighborhood association. And through the process of developing that campaign, we learned that the granddaughter of a very wealthy person in our Seattle area, who was actually part of a very wealthy family foundation, that her granddaughter had a child, so the great-grandchild went to the daycare that was connected to the neighborhood center. And that her grandchild had said that her grandmother was very interested in what was going on. And over a period of a year, before the campaign even really got started, we learned a lot about her grandchild and the great-grandchild. And so when we got into the campaign, we were able to approach her and say, do you think we could talk to your grandmother about what this campaign is about? And she said, oh yeah, I'm sure. So she invited her to come and meet with us. And we had a board member, the director of development, and myself as a capital campaign person in the meeting. And what we set out to do was to build a relationship with this woman. And since she was the chair, the head of her family foundation, we knew that she knew about foundations in our area. And what we wanted to talk to her about first was, what foundations did she think were the best ones for us to approach? And so we had a great conversation, and it led to a conversation where she said, well, and we asked her, I said, do you think your foundation might be included in that group? And she said, yeah, I think what you're sharing, we spent much more time talking about and sharing what our plan was and what we wanted to achieve, not about the money part of it. So we got to that place and we said, do you think that would be something that your foundation might be interested in? She said, oh yes, I think you should definitely put in a request. And so I was able to say at that point, and it was the first time that we actually talked money. I said, well, I know you have a wide range of grants that you grant. What would you consider to be an appropriate amount that we could ask for? And she said $500,000. And I was like, tried to keep a straight face because I was very excited, because my thought was, well, maybe $50,000. So we said, great, we'll do that. We'll submit that. And she said, yes, and make sure you address it to this person. And we said, fine. And then as something we totally did not expect, she said, well, you will be making personal asks as well, won't you? And we said, oh, yes, we're definitely going to do that. Well, please send me information when you're ready to do that, because I want to be part of this capital campaign. So the outcome was, we went back to the office, we wrote up the grant request exactly as the grantors had written it, and 10 days later received a check for $500,000. Most of that work was done in a year before that meeting. And because we had focused on the relationship and finding out what would really be connecting to this family, and that's what brought them interested in being a part of what we were trying to do. So for board members, there are many roles they can take to be a part of fundraising. The first one is identifying prospects. Not in that sense of like, who can I get to give us money, but just who do they meet with, know with, who has interests that are similar to theirs. Maybe it's a nonprofit that has to do with social services. Maybe it's a arts organization. So who are the people that they know that are involved in the organizations or just interested in the issues they're interested in? Cultivators, who help us develop. In this case, it was a board member who helped us develop kind of the relationship and getting to know this woman. Those who are good or want to be a part of being a solicitor, generally because they actually know the person that they're going to be talking to who may be making a gift, not because they're just out there talking to strangers. And then the stewards. The idea of stewardship is a very ancient idea. It comes from the idea that one is taking care of property or fields or a farm that's not really theirs, but they're doing it for the owner. And so the stewards of our board are the people who are helping to support the organization by thanking, by letting people know how they can be involved. Let's go into it a little bit more. Prospectors. Good donors, they may have lots of business contacts. They may, do you know where all your board members work or where they're connected? Here in the greater Seattle area, everyone wants to have someone on their board who's part of Microsoft because they have a very interesting way of making grants. And so just understanding and building the relationship with your board to get to know what are their contacts, where are their interests? Not that they're going to be asked the next day, but that you understand the environment that your board is living in. And they can help you identify names of new people, and it says here, moving to Seattle, but moving into your community who might be interested in participating in your organization. And that they show an interest in your mission. So all of these happen if your board, if you could teach them to do one thing today, it would be this. When someone asks them out in their lives, what do you do, which is something we all do, they could say, in my case, I work at City University of Seattle, and I'm on the board of the neighborhood center. If your board members only learn to do that as a regular way, they invite conversation by adding where they are involved in their community. So, cultivators. Cultivators can meet with potential donors, get to know them, share their experience as a peer. So if there's someone who has given, but you would helping, they would give more, or there is someone new who's become a volunteer. The cultivators are people who are curious people who want to learn about the people who understand and like their organization. The board member can be asked perhaps to engage with them, to connect them to other prospects. And the board member could even choose to host an event at their home. These events that have been very successful are around never asking for money, but actually bringing people together to learn about your organization. From that, there may be 1 or 2 out of 20 people who want to know more, but you've then included 20 more people who know about your organization. And your board member can feel that they have advanced the breadth of your organization. Solicitors. So solicitors will always work with a staff member. It's important that board members know they're never going to be sent out to talk to anybody without the assistance of the staff. Lunches, breakfast, dinners. It could be signing a letter. It could be making a follow-up phone call, personal meetings, but that they do this in partnership with the staff. Again, we want our board members to know that they're not alone, that we're all in this together, that the culture of philanthropy is the staff and the board of the whole organization. And the board members could be the one to help schedule a meeting with someone because they know them better. There are many times when if I had tried to call a potential donor, they would have never responded to me because they didn't know me. But when someone on my board called them and said, we'd like to get together and have lunch and Libby's going to be there with us, then they're like, oh, sure, why not? Are you going to ask me for money? And hopefully the board member is going to go, no, we want to talk to you about our organization. We want to tell you more. We want to be able to open a door with you. So again, they will always work with staff to ensure, and they look at the time of when it's appropriate. In this capital campaign that I worked on, there were people that we knew were going to be out of town, or we knew that they were sending a child off to college. And so the board member could help us know that, to know when would be the best time to talk to them. Because we had a length of time to meet with different people. We didn't have to do it all at the same time. So, oh, I think I did that one. Stewards. So, stewards, everyone on your board has the capacity to thank donors. And if they are stewards and only stewards, and they are actively involved in thanking donors, they are contributing to the efforts in fundraising. I worked at another organization where the board had not really been involved with fundraising, and we started with the year-end appeal. It was a letter. I had all the letters done, all the envelopes ready, and the board got together one evening with snacks, and they personally signed all of the letters. If they knew the person, they wrote a little note. They crossed out the typewritten name on the salutation and wrote in their name. And that was the first time that they'd really gotten involved in knowing about it. And as a consequence, they were very interested to know how the money was coming in, how people were responding. So I would get calls saying, well, how's it going? Where have we met our goal? And for the first time in a number of years, we met the goal that they had set for that year-end appeal. And they felt more ownerships. Beyond that, then they were given a few people to thank in a variety of different ways. We gave scripts for if they called and no one answered and they left a message. We gave scripts for if the person actually did pick up the phone, what they could say to them. We gave them other ways to send emails or other to actually make a personal thank you. I often use the guideline with boards and with other folks to remember what I would like as a donor. And as a donor, I like to be thanked. Not thanked and asked again, but just thanked first. And that's something that all of our board members and all of our staff members, but in particular our board members, can do. So stewards can also be grouped by region or asked to thank donors in a specific community. So if you're part of a nonprofit that's broader than your local community, for example, my high school has different groups around the country, and they have some board members who are connected to those groups. So they make the thank you and they kind of connect with people because they're closer to me than my high school is, which is across the country. So staff can give the board member steward names of donors that the board thinks they can contact directly, calling, as I said, calling, sending a handwritten note. If you're probably aware now that if you actually receive a handwritten note, you are amazed. And you actually open it up. Taking them to lunch or coffee or dinner, rearranging a meeting. Sometimes the best thing to do is to offer a tour, to come and see your place. Someone I know who works in the arts made a big effort when they went to the performances to introduce themselves to people that were sitting around them and say that they were from the board and thank them for coming, because in those organizations the tickets also contribute to the balance sheet of the nonprofit, and so everyone who attends can be thanked for their contribution to this arts organization. With human service organizations, that isn't going to be the case because the recipients of the services are not generally the donors to the service. But in these thank you times, in these notes, in taking people to lunch, it's time to get to know folks, not to ask again, but to find out what brings them close to this organization. How is it that they want to be involved? How did they get there? And in those cases, you begin to learn and also find out something about the, how would I put it? Something about the interest of this person. Are they potentially going to be someone who is going to grow as a donor or not? And that way we thank, we enjoy them, and we find out more. As a fundraising professional, I think probably my greatest skill is curiosity, just to learn about folks. So all of your board members know when they represent the mission that they can be a community ambassador. And this visual here, if you think of the board member as the very center dot on this screen, it's that idea that the people closest to them may know about your organization that they're a part of. But as that grows, there's a possibility that those people then tell more people, and so on, until you have a very large circle of people who know about your organization. But none of that can happen if the board members don't know how to talk about the mission, how to talk about your organization. And so that leads us to how can we help them know your case. So let's do a little bit beyond the basics. So what prevents us, any of us, from being great ambassadors? There's a lack of knowledge. There's a fear that board members have of misrepresenting the organization. And there's this little bit of thing about scarcity that we don't really want to let people know that we need resources to have our mission succeed. And what I've suggested to many board members is to remember that no one in our community, or in any community, will want to contribute to an organization that's begging, or an organization that needs a roof fixed and that we have to have money to fix the roof. They want to be a part of our organization because of what we do that succeeds in the world. So it brings great music, it feeds the hungry, it houses those in need. That's what people can connect to. But most of our board members actually have a pretty high level lack of knowledge about our organization. If you think as a professional how your board members are recruited, they may be recruited not from people who are already somewhat connected, but through business contacts. And those folks, when they come closer to the organization, need education to know how they're going to be able to be a part of this organization. And then there's a fear of misrepresenting the organization. And that comes about because that lack of knowledge has not given them an opportunity to check out how they would talk to people, or to be able to say, as I have said many times, you know, I don't know as much about this program that you're asking me about that our organization has. If you would let me, it would be a great help to me to let me go back and find out more about it and get in touch with you. It will help me know more about it so that when someone else asks, I can tell them. And then I can provide you with the information so you can tell other people about it. Most people are really eager to help you. And in this case, you've not only given them a chance to help you by letting you go find out the information, you've also set up an opportunity where you're going to call them back. You're going to be in touch with them, which means you have another chance to build relationship with them. I always try to leave people I'm talking with some next step so that I have a reason to contact them. All right, so, I'm going to go back. So in order to know the case, in order to understand the case of your organization, your board has to first be in touch with why they're there. And I'm going to suggest to you that Simon Sinek is a gentleman who wrote a book called Start With Why. He also has a video on YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and put in Start With Why, it's about an 18-minute video. And I have found this to be probably the best way to introduce a board to connecting with the why of the organization and how they want to transmit it to the rest of the community. So, and he says, inspire someone every day with everything we say and do, and we can start with why. So here's an example. I went to visit a board a couple months ago, and we started by showing this video, Start with Why. And without any other information or discussion about their role, I asked each one of them if they could share with me why they were on the board. And each one of them had a very clear why. And it was not about the activities of the organization, it came from their heart. In this case, it's an organization that was wanting to build housing for to increase foster care and do it in a multi-generational way. And so one of the people was able to say, my why is because we have taken care of foster children and I want there to be more opportunities. Another person actually had been a foster child. Another person spoke about that they wanted every child to know that they were loved. So they weren't talking about the activities of the organization. They were talking more about the why of the organization. So there's this golden circle, and the outer circle is what your organization does. And every organization on the planet knows what they do. It's the products they sell or the services. So we provide shelter for homeless people. We provide food at our food bank for people in need. We provide symphony music for the public. That's the what that they do. And some organizations know how they do it. These are things that make them special or set them apart. We have an organization here in Seattle, Fair Start, that's very involved in fighting homelessness and food insecurity. But the how of they do it is by having restaurants and providing training for homeless and near homeless folks to learn food service so that they can then be gainfully employed and work towards getting out of the cycle of homelessness. They also do that in terms of how they connect with being able to feed people in that way. So what most people have to get to is understanding that very few organizations know why they do what they do. And the why is not about making money if it's a commercial effort, and the why is not to raise money, it's the result. The why is the purpose, the cause, or the belief. And for nonprofits, the very reason that they exist, this why is actually much easier to get to than it is in a for-profit company. So the why of City University of Seattle, beyond the Sanford Institute, is to provide lifelong learning to the working adult. Why we do it? Because our why was there weren't opportunities when our university started for people who were working to get their degrees. That's because we started way back in the early 70s. And those things weren't available in regular institutions. People thought if you weren't 18 to 22, you didn't go to college. So that's our why. And we continue to have it to provide lifelong learning because we have many people who come back who want to get another degree or a certificate, do something else. They want to advance their knowledge. The why of Fair Start is because they want the world to know that everyone has the chance to move from difficult situations into better ones, and that doing it through food and food services is the way they can do that. So I'd ask you, as we kind of lead to this towards the end of our time, is to think for a moment, what is the why of your organization and how you go about succeeding that why, fulfilling that why, and then what you do. Because the question for your board members is, how can they hold on to the why personally, how you can share with them the how and the what, so that when they're in the community, when they're talking to people, when they're hosting a table at your event, they can feel confident to share the story of the why, the how, and the what of your community, of your organization. And that will allow them to then take the next steps into being a part of fundraising. Because it's a process of developing that relationship with them, just as you're hoping they will help you develop relationships outside. A few other things I want to share with you that I've learned about working with boards and fundraising that come up. One is that some nonprofits are fearful of asking board members to make a financial contribution to the organization. They put it in some different ways. They say, well, if you're giving your time, then it's okay if you don't give money. Or if they say you can, if you get a gift, you don't have to give a gift. And it is my experience and my conviction that in this life, everyone has three things to give. They have time, they have talent, and they have treasure. And that our board members need to be able to give all three of those things. And there's a very particular reason why they have to give all three. So you're already asking them for their time to be a part of the organization, to help guide the organization, to be financially responsible for the organization. You've asked them to give their talent, many of them because they have certain expertise. They have some financial background, or they have some background in the kinds of work that your organization does, or they have business contacts. That's their talent. The question of treasure is one that is, again, gets back to that fearful place. How do you talk to people about those things? In the cases of organizations I've been a part of, board presidents and the executive director have met with potential board members. There's a written job description for the board, and part of it is to go over this time, talent, and treasure. The reason I don't think giving time instead of treasure works is because if I'm ever in a position as a board member or even as a staff person to make a request for a donation, and I'm asked, well, what did you give? Because it does happen. And I say to that person, well, I give my time, not money. Then any donor or prospective donor can say, well, great, I'll give my time. How can I volunteer? And that's not going to get the organization to where it needs to be. Along with that, if they're asked, so what did you give? And they can say, well, I make an annual gift every year, and I'm not asking you to name an amount right now. And so I just want you to know that I do give an annual gift every year. Then the person who's being asked knows that that board member or that person who's asking them has what I call skin in the game. They have put their money in where their mouth is about why this organization is important. It's not so important as to the amount of that money, but it's always important that the money be given. And that goes to, I've worked with organizations that have a board where the budget is $15,000, and virtually everyone's a volunteer. But even if it's $1 or the price of a latte, that they have actually extended their hand with cash to the organization means that they have committed something important as the time and the talent. They have contributed their treasure. Because without that, they don't have an answer to anyone who's asking, well, how do you contribute? And they also will always carry the knowledge that they actually haven't given to the organization. And their commitment is one that's very important. And so as a fundraising professional, whenever I've gone into an organization, I have made a financial donation to that organization in the very first week or so that I was on the staff, because I always wanted to say, this is something that I can put my resources towards. It might not be very much, but it's enough for me to know that I have committed all time, talent, and treasure to the organization. I think I'm running ahead of time, Rachel. And I'm wondering if there's some questions that could help me kind of go in a different direction. And I'm hopeful that Rachel can hear me.
Yes, we can. So we do have a question. How would you approach establishing this responsibility if the board is being reconfigured and new members know this responsibility versus existing members who do not embrace this role?
Yes, that's a great question. There's a tipping point for the new and the old, and my suggestion would be to meet individually with those who have not been a part of that and bring them on board with it, and allow, this is a really hard thing to do sometimes. I want my board members always to know that I don't treat them as just any warm body will do, that who they are and how they're on this board is very important as an individual. And it may be that as we've moved to this different way of organizing the board and understanding fundraising, that some of those board members, that doesn't fit for them. And so we have to find a way to graciously allow them to find the place that does work for them. Because I know myself, I was on a board and I, kind of didn't show up for a couple of meetings. And I had an ED call me and say, what's going on or whatever. And I think, my guilt was, how can I leave this organization? I said I would be on the board for 3 years and now my life is crazy and I can't really do it. And I really appreciated her ability to say, it's possible that this doesn't fit for you now. And I really want to give you permission to seek other opportunities or take a break or something. And, of course I said, well, I don't want to leave you in the lurch and all of those things. And she was able to say, no, it's really okay, because we want the people on our board to really be there. And we don't want them to go off in a huff because you've changed the, quote, the rules about their participation in fundraising. But again, it's an education and relationship thing. So I would meet with them. If the board president's really on board for the new movement, that person can too. And again, be curious, listen to how it is or why it is that this new movement they're not very happy with it. And let them tell you about it, and then perhaps give them an out, because nobody wants to say, this doesn't fit for me anymore. And we need to be the people to say, it's okay. It's okay if this doesn't fit for you anymore. And then hopefully we'll keep you as someone who might want to be involved in a different way. Maybe you'll come to an event, whatever. But it's sort of like we're releasing them with our care and our kindness. Another question?
We do have a list of questions, but do you want to hold them for the Q&A time?
No, we could start now because I probably do better with Q&A.
Okay, well, we'll then dive right in. So another question is, what advice do you have for startup nonprofits that lack funds for basic overhead, such as staff compensation, marketing, advertising, or materials?
Wow. Okay, so I'm going to guess that this organization does it have a board? Can you ask that question? So if it has a board, then the board is financially responsible to create these things.
She said yes, that they do have a board.
They do have a board, and they are involved in the work that they want to be involved in. And I presume that that's a volunteer. The why has to be the strongest thing, and the how and the what become the emphasis to push on how we're going to do this. So if everyone's why is very strong, I actually got into fundraising because I was with an organization that wanted to do a new program. And they kind of had all the pieces. The only piece they didn't have was the money to start it. And I found myself saying, is money really the only reason we can't do this? And they all said, yeah. And I said, okay, then we just have to find the money. So it's a soul searching thing to say, are we really set to do this? And is money really the only way that we can't do it? And then it's that fact of, who do you know? Who can we talk to? How can we build relationships? And begin to sort of know that if we have a budget, we have to find our way. Many organizations say, well, I'm just going to go get a grant and then we'll get started. Well, a granting process is also a building a relationship process. You have to do the research to find, is this the right grant? Perhaps ask for advice from the grantors, a letter of interest to see if they're interested. And so building relationships right then and there, and then asking the board, well, how much skin are you willing to put into this? You know, is everybody willing to kick in $25? Is everyone willing to kick in $100? And if all of that is a huge obstacle, then actually one of the best suggestions I've had in the past is to do a lot of research on whether there's a larger organization that's already functioning that has at least part of what your why is, and go and talk with them. How did you get to this place? This is our program. It's sort of similar to yours. Can you show us or teach us how you did this? And sometimes organizations have found that in order to really do what they want to do, they're better off joining a larger organization, getting some cases the ego of wanting it to just be ours out, and moving towards being a part of an organization that already has overhead, that already has staff, that already has some fundraising capability, and bringing your unique piece to that organization. That's a challenging thing to do, but I would look for organizations similar to yours and go and ask them how they got started and how they found the money. Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Libby. All right, next question. Do you establish a job description or board profile for new board members? If so, how is fundraising emphasized?
Well, the organizations I've been in, there's been one already. If you go back to the slides or you get them later about those 10 responsibilities of the board, the job description's built around that. I wouldn't start with the financial part because it usually freaks people out. But in that, the board has decided previously, okay, so what do we want to tell people about fundraising? That they'll be given 3 things each board meeting to do later. I mean, so the board can craft it however they want to, with an agreement from the whole board. Then as a new board member is going to come in, the board has decided together, this is what we want people to do connected with fundraising. You can, if you search online, sample nonprofit board job descriptions, you'll find a slew of them, and look at them. Most of what I've told you I've taken from some other place. So as I, in another career, taught English, I had a student who was from Saudi Arabia, and he started to call Google Uncle Google. And so I always say, go to Uncle Google and look up, ask your question. What does a board job description for fundraising look like? And start to explore those, bring them to the board and see how they match with your why, how, and what. And then craft it from there. Okay.
All right, thank you so much. And then kind of as a follow-up question, do you provide ongoing board training?
To a board, when I have a board, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's things like, well, one thing I'm very big on now is and Sanford Philanthropy teaches on is donor stewardship. So I looked up the stewardship or the donor facts through Blackbaud for 2017, and found out that it's twice as hard to get a new donor as it is to keep and advance a donor you already have. And so I would take one of those documents, and have time, not at the end of the board meeting, but at different board meetings in the beginning, to teach them more about fundraising and their role. One thing that happened, unfortunately, at least twice in my career, is that as the fundraising professional, I was hired, and from then on out, anything that had to do with fundraising, people said, well, go talk to Libby. She takes care of all that. And as I tried to explain to those organizations, if you have me do all of it, then when I leave, I take all the relationships and the connections and the information that's in my head that I haven't quite gotten into Excel or wherever database I'm working from, and it kind of goes away. And at least on 2 occasions, I know after the fact that the fundraising capabilities of that organization really dropped. And then as a fundraising executive, a new person got hired, they had to start all over again. And I imagine that there's fundraising staff on this webinar that has had that happen to them and is happening to them even now. And that's part of the why the board has to be involved in this, because they have to hold the history of the fundraising, so that if any one piece falls out, they get a new executive director, they have a new development person, that there's a continuity that can be there, that doesn't go away just because one particular staff person is there or not there.
Thank you, Libby.
Mm-hmm.
All right, another question. What is your perspective on mandatory board dues?
Well, I'd have to think. First of all, if it's a dues organization, if it's a nonprofit that actually is based on dues, then board members should be responsible for the same dues that anybody else would, in addition to make a gift. But here's the dilemma of dues as a fundraising, as a gift to the organization. Unless there's a long history of setting the bar at that amount of money, it seems it's hard to get people to give beyond that. And that would be a concern of mine, is that you set a dues, and so they're like, well, okay, so I've done my $100, my $1,000, or if you're part of Children's Hospital here in Seattle, my $25,000 to be on the board. Then you could sit back and say, I've done my thing. If there's a set amount that's presumed that you're going to donate each year, I'd probably like it to be said that way rather than dues, because dues tends to be sort of stagnant. And again, then you get the yes or the no. Oh, I can't do that, but I could give this amount. Well, is that board member important to you such that you want to be able to have them be there, but they haven't met the dues? So those are some of the questions I would ask about what is the positive effect of having the board have dues, and what are the potential pitfalls? And the biggest pitfall I see is that it may hamper them giving more. That would be my, kind of initial piece on it. I actually have not worked for a nonprofit that has based their board on dues. So.
Thank you. All right, we're just gonna tackle these questions one at a time.
Sure.
So our next one is, how do you tackle the challenges faced by a board that is working to engage younger members along with older individuals, 50 and above, and address the disparity in their ability to give their time, talent, and treasure?
Okay. So if you have your camera, your visual on, you can tell that I am not a millennial. And you can see that from my experience. So I am the end of the baby boom. I have a daughter who's a millennial. And so I imagine this board where I'm on the board and she's on the board. Okay? But here's the difference in our lives. I have had many years of employment. I have investments hoping to retire. I own my house. I'm not looking to have a child and thinking about how I might raise them and all of those kind of things. So the way in which I can give money is probably different than the younger person. My daughter actually very successfully, we had a big celebration, has just paid off her financial aid from college. She and her wife who have just bought a house, and they have a dog, and they're tight. Things are tight for them. So I think about myself when I was her age. I made contributions, and actually I was on a board, I think, when I was her age. And I know that I didn't give as much as some of the older people on that board. So it isn't necessarily the dollar amount, it's being able to have a dialogue, because younger folks are in a different place in their life than the older established folks on the board, and they need to be able to understand each other. The millennials are generally, my experience, are very much more involved in ways of volunteering and working together with peers to move things along. And so I say, I ask them, I don't want to say don't give because you're in this stage of your life. I want them to give, but I want them to know that I want to develop them as a donor so that they potentially stay loyal to my organization and that they will give as their life allows them to, which is much what happened to me and to many of the people I'm sure who are on this webinar. It's a sense of, my parents would say, "Oh, you people are protesting. You don't contribute to the world. Blah 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 blah." And in a sense, it was a cruel thing to say because we were very engaged. We may just not have had a lot of money to share at that point. So helping a dialogue exist between those groups on the board is another way to get at this why and how, and a way to talk about how do we all feel. So sometimes it's a proportion of income, a tenth of a month's salary, or something that allows people to give based on their means, not necessarily based on a judgment that it should be this amount and this person now feels that they can't give that amount.
Thank you, Libby. All right, we're going to dive into our last question because we are coming close to the end of our hour. So this one is sort of a two-part question. How do you track and measure board fundraising effectiveness on an ongoing basis? And how do you navigate a board member who continues to resist fundraising?
Okay. The first one, depending upon your size and your way, I mean, you can track things on an Excel sheet. You can track it on Salesforce. You can track it in a million different ways. But what I've done is, meet with the board president before the beginning of the year of the organization, whenever that is, and kind of talk through what they want to be responsible for, what their giving is going to be. And then you're also always building relationships with board members. So some sort of tickler to once a month or once every month, let them know kind of where they are with things, and how, what they've committed to, and what the gifts are that have come in. And so that's a way of keeping track of their giving. And they're getting as well. So there has, they want to be both, because they want to say, well, I introduced you to Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith made a donation for $10,000, so I want that on my get column. And you can do that. But again, it's about creating an agreement with them. A board member who continues to resist fundraising needs to be given a very loving and kind way of being able to leave the board. And that might be from the board president and the executive director, something that says, sometimes it's like, well, we have this another volunteer committee that isn't the board. If you would like to stay involved with the organization in a different way, we'd love to have you do this. But this is the boundaries, this is the parameter of the board, because the board, again, back to that slide 9 and 10, is responsible for the financial well-being of the organization. Fundraising is fundamental to our role. So we appreciate all you've done, and if that doesn't work for you, then we invite you to be a part of our organization in some other way. And that's a hard conversation. But if it doesn't happen, then that starts to bleed into other people and resistance and people pointing fingers and they don't really give, and that's not going to help the board. So once that happens, that boundary, if the organization can say to the boards and give them a celebration, say goodbye to them in a really wonderful way, then everybody knows we're serious about this. Our why is so important that we take seriously our responsibility, and that actually strengthens a board. The other things bleed off energy, and it makes people kind of look, oh, they didn't do something. It's the same with people who don't show up to meetings. It hurts the board. So we have to find ways to ultimately say, it's time for you to move in a different direction, because what we're doing is that important. So I think, yeah, so I think my contact information is somewhere, or you can get it out to folks, and I'm more happy to talk with folks and give you other ideas, talk through things, and thankfully I reduced the thing, so I have no idea what I look like. So hopefully I didn't, it was fine. And I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, that this Sanford Institute of Philanthropy is creating a way for all of us to help more people, bring more music, arts, whatever it is that we're involved with, save more land, drinking water, all of those things. And it is my total conviction that we are doing among the most important work in the world. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you for your fantastic presentation today. Very thoughtful, and thank you for answering our many good questions from our audience. So there are some people asking for your information. I believe we have it earlier on our slides, and just so you all know, a copy of the deck will be sent out in 24 to 48 hours, and as well as a recording of this webinar. So you'll be able to see her contact information there. Libby, would you be able to at least share your email out loud to our audience?
Sure. It's L like Lucky, Stellas. So L, S like Sam, T like Tom, E, L, L, A, S like Sam, at cityu.edu.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And just a quick reminder to everybody, once this webinar closes, a survey is going to launch automatically, and we would really appreciate your feedback. It's a short survey. It helps us create better webinars for you in the future and help us produce wonderful webinars like this one we did today with Libby. So again, we really appreciate your feedback. And once again, Libby, thank you so much. Please stay tuned for our next webinar in June. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us or to Libby, and we'd be happy to answer them.
Great. Thanks, guys.
With that, I'll let you all go and stay tuned for our next webinar. Take care.
Bye.